How's it going, everyone? It's Riley's Redzone back with another weekly NFL picks episode, and we are already in week 3 of the season, so I'm excited to keep it going. For this week, we do have another guest picker. It is Charlie. He's given me the list of, he said, quote, he has the script of what's going to happen this week. See if he can go 16-0. So we're going to jump right into who we think wins each game, and as mentioned in previous episodes with this series, I just pick who is going to win the game. We don't get into the full spreads. We may mention them to know who's the favorite or not, but we just pick who wins the game. Now, before jumping into next week, let's quick recap. Last week we had Cody on in the studio as well, which was a great time. But being honest, it was not the strongest week for either of us, as I had one of my worst weeks to date. 7-9 was my record, and he did not do much better either. 8-8 will be his record right now, technically at the top of the guest picker leaderboard, but you got to think at some point somebody's going to beat that. And it was because there were a lot of upsets. There ended up being, I counted, about 7 of my top 10 teams lost last week. And that also kind of plays into this week when I'm adjusting where I think teams are and who's at the top. It makes it difficult because you almost can't change too much because they all struggled. So with that being said, let's jump into the present now and the future, really, of what could happen this week, starting with tonight's game between the Patriots and the Jets. The Patriots play the Seahawks close, get it into overtime, but can't quite get the victory. Meanwhile, the Jets able to hold off the Titans and get a win. The Jets are kind of in the middle for me, where I thought that they'd be pretty strong going into the year. They're still going to be in that range, especially with, we'll talk about Miami later, maybe struggling a little bit more without Tua in the division. I think that they're a wild card team, really looking at it. I think their floor is decently high, but their ceiling is not as high as I thought based on a few weeks of play, but I think they have a solid roster. The Patriots are just a sneaky team. Coming into the season, I had them towards the bottom of the standings, as I don't think their roster is particularly strong, but they are going to play close games. And so it's going to be a tight one no matter who they play. But I got to go with the Jets for this week. I think it's a safer play. They're much higher in the rankings, so I'll go with New York in tonight's matchup. Switching to the next day, going in ahead to Sunday, where we have all these games. Let's start with the Giants and the Browns. The Giants were so close, and I thought they'd get the victory last week. They get right down to the wire. I mean, you don't allow a touchdown and you still lose the game. That is outrageous. I cannot believe it. I was really feeling good about Malik Neighbors for a long time, and obviously towards the end of the game, it was a little bit of a struggle on that last piece, but their offense is still not good in New York, but I think their defense then showed, like, we did our job. We held them to 3-7 times. You see the final score with Washington with 21 points. You think they scored a couple touchdowns. No, they didn't. But that's how bad the offense was. Meanwhile, the Browns are able to get back on the right side of things against the Jaguars, which I did think was going to happen. They're just like the Jets to me. Very strong defense. Aaron Rodgers is a better quarterback than Deshaun Watson, but if he can play good enough, they can get victories. It's just a safer pick here to go with the Browns. The Giants, figuratively, at some point should probably right the ship, but I'll go with Cleveland for this matchup to be on the safe side as well. Perhaps the most interesting matchup of the week of maybe, two top teams clashing is the Saints and the Eagles. Entering the season, the Eagles are up there in the NFC. They're in the top few for sure, but the Saints have come out of nowhere and have all of a sudden greatly, I raised them, I think it was 13 or nearly 20 spots in the power rankings, basically, because they have looked legit. Not only have they won games, but they won them convincingly. Now, I will say that first week, can't always, put all of it when you're playing the Panthers. But this last week against the Cowboys, I still think the Cowboys are a decent team. You got to give the Saints a little bit of credit. But the Eagles just barely fall to the Falcons. I mean, that was crazy. I thought I'd at least get that pick right there. Captain Kirko, we'll talk about him later with Atlanta. They come out of nowhere and they steal the victory there. But the Eagles defensively should be okay. It's just they fell apart in that last minute there. Offensively, obviously, if Saquon makes that catch too, that's a different ball game. But I'm going to go with the Eagles in a get-back game here. They are the underdog, believe it or not, in the spread. And this is the first one that Charlie is going to disagree with me on. And he's going with the Saints, the red hot Saints, which I can get behind. They have looked really well. I'm very shocked, though, still that the Saints are the favorite in this game. And so I'm going with the Eagles, and I have confidence in that one. That's a straight up underdog pick. We'll talk about it a little bit, but Charlie threw out a handful of upsets. I think there's going to be less than there were last week, and so I still have a few on there. That's my pure, I'm shocked the spread is where it is upset. Texans, Vikings. This is a tricky one because the Texans have looked good. I really think they're going to take a step up this year, and Stroud is looking like him right now. Him and Nico Collins with that connection as well is looking phenomenal. But I don't think they've put the pedal to the metal yet. I think they will when we get to late season. They'll really ascend. I have them now in the top 7 or so teams. But I think I just need to see a complete game, kind of a stronger performance to really put them at the top of the top. But they are looking really good. The Vikings, shockingly, get the upset over the Niners. They've looked pound for pound like one of the best teams in football over 2 weeks. I mean, their offense with Sam Darnold has looked very successful. They think Jefferson's going to be ready for this week, according to Adam Schefter. If not, Jalen Naylor has stepped up big time for them offensively. I don't think Addison's going to be ready, but if Justin Jefferson is, that's where you make things interesting here. Defensively is where they've really shined, but I'm going to go with the Texans here on the road to get a victory over the Vikings. I think that the Vikings have shown that they were underrated nationally, and I when talking to people, would always kind of say they're going to make a little bit of noise. They could still be a wild card team, but I thought maybe in the 8-win range, that's still about where I feel. I think it's a little early to tell. Certainly shocking they were able to get some victories that they were against the Niners, but I'll go with the Texans. Charlie's going to go with the Vikings, so this is another one where we split our picks, and so that could be telling as to what our records will end up being. So we vary in that opinion there. Let's jump to the Broncos and the Bucks, where the Broncos, I just, going into the season 2, have them right towards the bottom. I just don't think they're a very good football team. Bo Nix was the safe choice at quarterback. He's fine. I think he's going to progress throughout the season, but overall, they'll make a couple random upsets probably this year, but I doubt they'll be the favorite in many games. Meanwhile, the Bucks, a little bit of a shocking start with Baker. You always have a chance, but they've legit looked like a solid team. I don't think that you can put them all the way up there. Again, it's kind of like the Texans, but beating a team like the Lions is impressive for sure. And so against the Broncos, I definitely need to go with the Buccaneers here to be safe. And so does Charlie. That makes logical sense, I think, in this situation. But yet again, the Broncos could probably pull off a few random upsets this year. Packers, Titans. This is a weird one because we've got the Malik Willis Bowl, if you will. Malik Willis was with the Titans for a long time. Now he gets the chance to start against them, even though he barely got to play in Tennessee. He gets the chance with Green Bay. I last week picked the Colts against the Packers, and Cody got that pick right, being Green Bay. He looked all right, I'd say, offensively, but I still am not going to put full confidence in their offense right now, although they've shown some flashes. The Titans have not looked great. Specifically, Will Levis is at times showing more of why we're going to lose the game than helping them succeed with some of these wild meme-worthy pictures of interceptions and tossing it back. I mean, it's been a rough one. And I honestly, some people don't. I like that Brian Callahan in the postgame is being honest here. He has a little bit of humor that it's like, the first week we could have punted a lot, and it's like this last time, that's a different ballgame if we don't make these decisions. And I don't think you can give up on Will Levis. I was hesitant going into the season. I've talked about it throughout this series. Your goal this season for Tennessee is to answer the question, is Will Levis the guy? Yeah, 2 weeks in, it doesn't necessarily look that way long term. It's playing very Carson Wentz-esque football, but you can't write it off. The Packers, I think, have a better roster, but this is the type of game where the Titans, who struggled in a couple close games, can't pull out the victories. I think they finally do it this week. At home, I was a little shocked they're the favorite, but I'll take the Titans. Charlie's going to go with the Packers, so he's split there again. And so that is an interesting predicament for sure. That's a few games right off the bat that we're going to vary there. I'm going with the Titans. Bears Colts. Speaking of the Colts that we talked against the Packers, the Bears and Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams does not look great, let's be honest here. But, you just don't want, as we'll talk about with the Panthers, a Bryce Young situation to unfold. I don't think you need to hit the panic button yet, purely. Obviously, you're not seeing signs of, holy cow, this guy's great, but it's too early to tell. Now, we also, I think, as Cody mentioned quite a bit last week, they, went out and got, last year DJ Moore, and they have Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, these players that they bring in. They haven't really seen Keenan Allen yet, but they get DeAndre Swift, but that offensive line is still a struggle, and we saw that this past week. Now, they played the Texans close, and so their defense, I knew, was taking a step up, but their offense just hasn't put it together yet. Meanwhile, the Colts have also not fully put it together yet. Anthony Richardson has some crazy plays, but also just on a consistency level is not there. I think they get back, though, this week, and I'd say the Colts get their victory for this season to start things off, and so does Charlie. They are the favorites at home. Against the Bears, I guess you do that. It's a close spread, so we're both going to go with the Indianapolis Colts in that game. That should be a very interesting one offensively. It's going to be which young quarterback steps up. Chargers, Steelers. These are two teams I feel really similar about, which is why I am very hesitant on this pick. This is one of two games where I'm picking a game based on gut feeling here. The Chargers and the Steelers are both winning football games. And the Steelers have been doing this for years. Their defense carries the game, and Fields has shown flashes, but they are going to win 19-13. They're going to win 17-9. They're going to win these very low-scoring games. And wouldn't you know, they face off against a team like the Chargers, who is a ground and pound, run the ball Jim Harbaugh team. This is the ultimate old head football game that I'm looking forward to, and it should be a tight one. I just don't know how to feel. It's going to be who can actually move the ball offensively. J.K. Dobbins has just resurrected magically as a running back for the Chargers, and he's looked great. The Steelers, as I said, Fields, they're there. The favorite is the Steelers, but this is one where my formula also would say to pick the Steelers, but I have a gut feeling game here that I'll go with the Chargers. As I mentioned last week, Jim Harbaugh wins everywhere he goes. Do I feel great about this pick? Not particularly compared to some of the other ones this week, but out of two teams that have shown that they can probably make some noise in the playoffs, potentially, I'll take the Chargers, and so does Charlie. We're both on the Jim Harbaugh bus there for this week. That game is going to be a fun one. Dolphins, Seahawks. These are two teams that are in that middle range in the teens for me. And the big question, obviously, with Miami, and now we see Tua go on IR, is that quarterback position. They signed Tyler Huntley, but they're probably going to go with Skylar Thompson. And the Seahawks are the definition of like a 7, the last spot in the wild card to me. Their roster, I think, is great. They just don't have upside. They have one of the best constructed teams, in my opinion, in the league, but I just don't see Geno and this offense propelling them to top tier elevations, even though they are winning football games as well. This is one where I'll take the safe choice. We're playing against a team that has a not, proven quarterback. I'll take the Seahawks, even though them winning that many games already is a little bit like, wow, okay, they haven't had the craziest schedule. Charlie's going with the Dolphins, which is fair. Their offense still could move potentially with their new position at quarterback, but long term it will be very intriguing to see what they do at that quarterback position for sure, with Tua on IR, and maybe we'll see again this year, I guess, which obviously was a topic of conversation. Panthers Raiders. This is one of those tank bowl games we thought, but the Raiders actually get a victory against the Ravens last week, which was shocking. But they get it done. That was just a lot of upsets, though. I moved them up a little bit, but that was more of a madness just occurs. I didn't really overreact on a lot of these things. The Panthers, man, this Bryce Young situation is something I did not see happening in this way at this time. He has not looked good at all. I mean, really, when you put it together. And so I can understand that right now, Andy Dalton probably is the better quarterback. It's very hard to give up on your number one pick, young quarterback, which you gave up capital to go get. That is really tough. I mean, this is different than even just a 25th pick in the first round or a third round guy that you throw in. It's like, okay, we got to give up on him. This is tough, man. And the thing is, I think Andy Dalton goes and balls out. As crazy as that is, the Red Rifle gets it going, and I could see this happening this week. And this is one where, just as the Chargers game, I'm going with a gut feeling underdog pick here. There is a trend over the last few years that a new can just spark something for a team and get a win that week. I always bring it up when we get to mid to late season when an interim head coach steps in for that first game. There is a momentum shift when that happens. I mean, we saw Antonio Pierce himself bring that in a few years ago. Rich Versace as well before that with the Raiders. I mean, you look at that, you also see other examples prior, like even Jeff Saturday on the Colts came in, and if I remember, he had a win that first week that everyone's like, whoa, watch out here. And that's actually, I think, what ended up getting Josh McDaniels fired from the Raiders. But I think Andy Dalton goes out here, has a good game, which gets, unfortunately for Bryce Young, who I am a fan of. I think he still has potential. I think he's kind of given the short end of the stick here quite often in Carolina, but the truth is he's not playing well with what is there. I think Andy Dalton, as a veteran, it does technically give them a better chance at winning games. Now, what's tough here is, in my opinion, if you're the Panthers, you're not winning the Super Bowl this year. You have a first-year head coach who I would hope the leash is not that short on, that you would get rid of him if you're number one, because it's not the coach's choice to roll with this number one guy. It's your franchise committed to this player. For that reason, I'm shocked that they're doing it, but the truth is Andy Dalton might be a better quarterback right now. For that reason, I'm going with the Panthers in an upset. Charlie's going with the Raiders. This is one of those where I think that Dalton just balls out. It makes Bryce Young look bad, which is unfortunate, but that's just the way it goes sometimes, and so the Panthers pick up their first dub, in my opinion. Niners-Rams, the NFC West showdown. Both teams are in a little bit different spot than where I thought they were at the beginning of the season. One of expectations with the Niners, but really both with injuries. Specifically, the Niners with McCaffrey being out, but Jordan Mason can still ball. The problem, though, is last week they did not look good against the Vikings, although they just made a lot of sloppy mistakes. Brock Purdy is that game manager, but he can get it done type of player, and I have him towards the top there. I dropped him a little bit further than some other teams that took losses. I had the Niners number one going into last week, but when you don't win, and they did it in the fashion they did, it wasn't a close game. They were purely outplayed and outcoached by the Minnesota Vikings, which is not something that should necessarily be happening with a Super Bowl contender or favorite. But the Rams, I still think Matthew Stafford is right there, but their receivers are injured. And who are they going to now? We're going with, a Tyler Johnson, who used to ball, by the way, back at Minnesota for the Gophers. Never got a shot with the Bucs. I'm glad he did with the Rams. But him being your number one receiver is probably not the best. You got Demarcus Robinson, who's bounced around a lot of teams. I think watch out for Jordan Whittington, a rookie for the Rams. But either way, that supporting cast is just slowly falling apart. I think the Niners get back. I'm a huge guy on get-back games for these teams. I think these top contenders that all took losses last week will bounce back. Charlie doesn't quite think so. He thinks the Rams will pull it off. And with Stafford still being healthy, you can't write them off. And that's what makes them a chance. With him and Sean McVay, it doesn't matter what that defense is doing, what that receiving corps looks like, they have a chance in the ball game. And so I'll go with the Niners, but Charlie could be on something here with the Rams for sure. Then we have the Lions and the Cardinals. Two teams that are up there, I'd say. The Lions taking the loss to the Bucs last week. Pound for pound to me I talked a little bit about with the Seahawks, but I think the Lions are constructed maybe the best of any team in the NFC. It's just, can they play on a consistent level? They at least played it close with the Bucs. I have less concerns about them than I do with, let's say, the Niners sputtering there. The Cardinals couldn't pull out the win against the Bills the first week, but then last week just put the hammer down. Finally, Kyler's throwing to Marvin Harrison Jr., and they're getting it to go. I mean, if their offense is playing like that, keep them in the mix. But I'll go with the Lions. I think it's a get-back game. I believe that their team is constructed very, very well. So is Charlie. Going to go with the Lions here. Should be an interesting one. This is probably like a 31-24 type of game in my opinion. But I think that we'll see some great offense here from both sides. Ravens-Cowboys is a good matchup because the Ravens have been beat, and it's shocking because they, on paper, are one of the better teams. Lamar Jackson's looks still great. Isaiah Likely has balled out throughout this season at times. We've seen Zay Flowers go. Like, they have all the pieces they need. It's, can they get Derrick Henry exactly involved as well throughout the year? I am not overly concerned about the Ravens. I'm going to be completely honest, even though, they are yet to get in that win column. The Cowboys, you get absolutely blown out last week against the Saints, but that's kind of a Cowboys thing. They're going to drop these random games super far. And the other thing is with the Cowboys, I never have them as a top 5 team. They're in that 6-10 range consistently. Their defense is great, but that's what you're just bound to get with Dallas. They're streaky. And for that reason, I'm going to go with the Ravens. I have more confidence in them. Yet again, get back. Charlie's going with the Cowboys, so that could go either way with that. Maybe my favorite matchup of the week. I think you could make the case for it. Should be a close one there, but give me the Ravens. The Chiefs and the Falcons. There's two sides. There's so much to talk about with both these teams. The Chiefs, I'm just going to reiterate what I said last week on this show, which was I am this much concerned about what the Chiefs are doing right now. I bumped them up to number 1 because everyone else lost in the top tier. This is one, again, where their players are not collectively on paper the best, but they go out there, they win games. When you have the best quarterback in football, anything can happen. Now, losing the injuries here with Pacheco, and you got to go, I think them getting Kareem Hunt again was smart. But here's the thing with the Chiefs. They're going to just cruise. You have to put them in the conversation. They're going to go to the playoffs and, be Super Bowl probably favorites again to three-peat. But the thing with them now, after I thought last week was going to be the game that they would lose, they were this close against the Bengals, which we'll talk about on the last game that Cincinnati's playing. They played it close, but the Chiefs are just going to drop random games. And the problem is, it reminds me of a few years ago when the Lions started really poorly, but I saw the flashes of this Dan Campbell team, and I picked them about 4 weeks in a row, and they just weren't winning, even though they'd lose by 3. At some point, it's going to happen. At some point, the Chiefs will drop a game, but I think it's going to be safe, really, to pick them more often than not. I took my chances last week with the Bengals, but didn't quite turn out. The Falcons, man, what a victory that was for them against the Eagles. Kirk Cousins looking like prime, like 2 years ago, Kirk. Dicing it down the field. I mean, that was 3 or 4 plays in a minute. He just gets them there. I like the Chiefs here straight up, but the Falcons, I bumped a little bit. With Kirk Cousins, that's where he's at again, you have to keep him in the mix in these late game situations. I could see that playing out here. This is going to be a within one possession in the fourth quarter type of game to me. I'll take the Chiefs, though, so is Charlie. I'm looking forward to that one, though. Jaguars and Bills. This is one. The Bills are kind of back. When you have Josh Allen, you're bound for good things. If their defense is actually putting it together, you got to put them up there. I've moved them up. They're maybe not in the top 5, but they are in the first tier of teams for me now. And I think they're legit. I remember 3 years ago, so I picked them 2 years in a row to win the Super Bowl. They didn't do it, but they're right back in the mix again. The Jaguars, I don't know how they're not, their team is good. Trevor Lawrence, I hope we just see this step up of what we really, really thought with him, but he's kind of just been that pure, safe number 1 pick. We just haven't seen that elite quarterback really come out of him yet. Wow, this would be a bad start for them if they were to lose again. You all of a sudden are kind of questioning Doug Peterson, and maybe you really do. I think that with Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence right now, it just feels like their ceiling is a wild card team, maybe divisional. I don't see them seeing this conference championship and Super Bowl aspirations, which when you have one of the most generational prospects we've ever seen, who is not a bust by a far sight, he's shown flashes, I'd be expecting a little bit more. And so maybe you do need to go for a potential home run higher, but at the same time, when you have Doug Peterson, you should be winning football games, and they haven't been doing so. I'm going to go with the Bills here, so does Charlie. To me, it's more a schedule thing. I'm not overly concerned about the Jaguars not starting the strongest, in my opinion. I think they've played some great teams in the Dolphins and the Browns, but certainly something to keep an eye on if they start that poorly to the year. And let's close it out with the Commanders and the Bengals. We talked about it with the Giants. The Commanders won with 7 field goals. That is ridiculous. Jaden Daniels has shown some good ability. The Bengals I bumped up with a loss because they showed that they can keep up with the big dogs again, and that's what we were concerned with after week 1. I didn't really, I mean, I was a little concerned, but it's like we know we're going to get back with that. I have to go with the Bengals here. They're just a better team at home. So does Charlie. I think that's the safe way to go in this matchup. So give us Cincinnati to close out the slate of games. So that'll do it for the picks portion, and let's quickly hop over to the fantasy league to give this recap. I was listed as the best manager last week as I scored 145 points out of a possible 148. Worst manager went to my opponent, Braden, who he had some stuff going on that day. He was, broadcasting a soccer game that he's not going to have time to check the lineup that Sunday, but he only scored 69 points. He had about 4 guys on the injured. That's just poor management. That's why Sleeper gave him that. And so I did have the biggest victory. Cody, after barely losing to me week 1, and he talked about it last week, he wins by 0.1%, about 2 yards on the dot. Is how much separated Cody and Carson in a crazy showdown with Cody barely winning by 2 yards. If Carson, the player, would have got 3 extra yards, that's a win. But overall, most points went to Zach, who scored 145. So when we take a look at this week's matchups, it's going to be me versus Zach, 2-2-0 teams facing off against each other. We also got Matthew and Cody, Braden and Carson. So both of those are 0-2 versus 1-1. We got a 1-1 battle between Charlie and Alex. We got Danny and Andrew, a 1-1 versus 0-2, and then a Nick versus Max 1-1 versus 2-0 showdown. And then when you look at the standings, we do have 2 undefeated teams in the Virginia mostly division, as we call it. All of the teams, to maybe give some lore here, in this element have related to Virginia. I'll go to college there in the state, depending on the schools. And then we threw Carson in there as well. He's out west right now. But the rest all have ties and are still more in the Midwest, but are from the land of 10,000 lakes. That's why the divisions are named that. But on that side, Max is undefeated. A lot of 1-1s. And then, there is going to be a reward and punishment. This is a dynasty league, but per year, there is going to be rewards and punishments. So you want to be at the top and you don't want to be at the bottom, which right now we have 3 0-2 teams in Matthew, Braden, and Andrew. So things to keep an eye on for sure. So that's the quick recap. That'll do it for this week's Week 3 NFL picks. I greatly appreciate you watching this entire video, and we'll be back next week with more and more guest picks as well.